This happened in 2011, and it was the first major project of Boko Haram on a national scale for which the Islamic sect took credit. Research shows that even though the activities of the Metasini sect, an Islamic militant group which terrorized parts of northern Nigeria in the early 80s, were well known to the government at the time, it failed to do anything until the group unleashed mayhem that left thousands of people dead. In fact, in Kano, the activities of the group were trivialized. Moves by former Nigerian leader Shehu Shagari to declare a state of emergency in Kano in order to deal with the sect were challenged by the governor, Abubakar Rimi, who belonged to an opposition party. A familiar script appears to be playing out. The Boko Haram sect appears to be treading a similar path with a strange conspiracy of silence.
You have a situation where the Speaker of the House of this country, the day after the Kanu killings in which a whole city was sacked, 20 bombs went off simultaneously, over 250 people killed in the space of 1 or 2 hours by the Boko Haram. And the following day, the Speaker of the House, who happens to be a northerner as well, turns around and says that Boko Haram should be forgiven for these activities, and that the president should sit down with them and talk to them. You begin to wonder what is really going on. Why is it the key leaders in the core north have not spoken out enough against these people and taken a stand?
Right now, Boko Haram's activities have picked up, with the group appearing to be emboldened by each new conquest. Things have changed. Initially, the Nigerian government dismissed the group, saying it would not negotiate with terrorists. Then the Kano blast happened, in which at least 200 people were killed. Now the Nigerian government has changed its mind. But BH, as people fearfully call the militant group, is no longer interested in dialogue, not until the government imposes Sharia law across Nigeria, it says.
I wrote an article almost a year ago titled the Poor Husband, the Rich Wife, and Boko Haram, in which I advocated that this government needs to take a very firm hand with Boko Haram and literally crush them. You do not negotiate with terrorists. It's basic law. You can negotiate with them years after you've been fighting them and you fought each other to a standstill, and perhaps you have the upper hand. But you don't start off by negotiating with them or pretending that they don't exist or being soft with them and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, that's what we've seen in the last 1 year.
Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin have argued that suffering and hardship make religion more relevant. With unemployment and, by extension, frustration levels at an all-time high in Nigeria, violence disguised by the garb of religion may be the path of least resistance for many.
Now, the thing is, Boko Haram may have begun as a religious organization, but right now it's bigger, and it threatens to consume very people, very institutions who may have sponsored it in the first place. Right now, it's even threatening the existence of Nigeria as a nation. Shima, Wanko, CCTV, Abuja.
Take it again straight.
Okay. Now.
One. You're on.
Let's start with your full name.
All right. Chief Femi Fani-Kayode.
And you are?
Well, I'm a Nigerian. I'm a lawyer by profession. I was a minister twice in this country. I was also spokesman for President Olusegun Obasanjo. I was Minister of Aviation after that, Minister of Culture and Tourism as well during that tenure.
Now, I want to ask you, just give us like an update. What are your thoughts concerning this issue, the security issue that Nigeria is facing, the challenge of Boko Haram? All sorts of things have been said. It's religious, it's political, it's economic. I mean, what do you think?
I think that anybody that tells you that there isn't a religious aspect to this clearly is not is either being deceitful or is not being honest with themselves. It's clearly religious. Not only that, there's a clear sectarian divide in this country today. It's also ethnic to a certain extent. And it's also part and parcel of a revolution that's going on, a class revolution that's going on within the Islamic world in North Africa and specifically in northern Nigeria. You cannot distinguish or disconnect the activities of Boko Haram and that of Al-Jabhat in East Africa and that of Al-Qaeda in parts of North Africa and in the Middle East. It's very, very clear what's going on. So if you want to solve the problem, the first thing you have to do is recognize it for what it is. It is essentially a religious problem. It is also an ethnic problem, and we need to get to it and try and solve that problem rather than to live in denial and pretend that it's not there. I wrote an article almost a year ago titled the Poor Husband, the Rich Wife, and Boko Haram, in which I advocated that this government needs to take a very firm hand with Boko Haram and literally crush them. You do not negotiate with terrorists. It's basic law. You can negotiate with them years after you've been fighting them and you fought each other to a standstill, and perhaps you have the upper hand. But you don't start off by negotiating with them or pretending that they don't exist, or being soft with them, and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, that's what we've seen in the last 1 year. You know, thousands of deaths later, cities have been sacked. The second largest city in Nigeria has been sacked, Kanu. Hundreds of people killed in the space of 1 hour. 20 bombs going off simultaneously. You know, threats to Christians, threats to the president's life, threats to the life of the president of the Christian Association. Churches being bombed on Christmas Day, and somebody will tell me that all is well in this country. No, all is not well, and it's incumbent upon our government and our people to stand firm against this evil and this terror, and do something about it. Not to dialogue, not to talk to them, but to stand up and say, enough is enough. And you meet force with a greater force, which the Nigerian army is capable of, and then after you've done that, you now begin to pick up the pieces and negotiate.
Now, President Jonathan has said that now I've been wondering, because like the Northern Governors Forum has just recently come from risen from a meeting where they agreed that, you know, we have to go back to the old methods of gathering intelligence, you know, getting among the people, you know. And I'm just wondering, how do you think this Boko Haram thing, I mean, how do you think it ought to be tackled?
Well, you know,
something is not being gotten right.
I'd be more impressed if the Northern Governors Forum would first of all respond to the very serious allegation made by a spokesman of Boko Haram that some of them have been paying them protection money over the years. I'd be far more interested in them getting up and saying, as chief security officers of their states, that they will defend the life and property of every Christian, every Igbo man, every Southerner, every Middle Belter, and every Muslim person in their state. I'd be far more impressed if they got down to doing that than talk about issues of intelligence gathering. This is nothing new. Many of them know who these boys are. Many of them use them in various militias, political militias over the years to further their own political interests. Now you have a classic case where the falcon no longer listens to the falconer. These boys have gone on their own rampage. They're organizing themselves. They've got external funding. They've got internal funding. They're very well organized. They are not a rabble. They are very sophisticated. And they are presenting a very real threat, not just to Nigeria, but to the northern ruling class itself. And they, that is the northern governors, have a duty to do something about it more than anybody else. Not just the governors, the traditional rulers of the north. They need to call these boys to order before it turns the whole of Nigeria into a hell, into a burning fire, into a situation where we'll have a war for the next 100 years.
Now, I want to ask you now, just to move away from. Now, I want to ask you now. You know, there's this thing that Karl Marx said. He said that religious extremism thrives in the middle of suffering and hardship. You think? I mean, there's some truth to that.
I don't accept that at all, because if you look at other countries, if you look at our country, we've had poverty for many, many years. There will always be poverty. But that doesn't translate into the desire to get up and chop off somebody's head simply because he doesn't share your own version of Islam. I mean, there are millions and millions of Muslims all over the world. Indonesia has the largest concentration of Muslims in the world. You have some issues there. But in the main, most of the Muslims in Indonesia, it's a secular state, by the way, are perfectly decent, reasonable people. The same with India, which has the second largest concentration of Muslims in the world. It's a secular state. By and large, it's a reasonably peaceful place, even though there was a war with Pakistan, which was a religious war. But by and large, India is a peaceful place, and you have many Muslims there. You have Muslims all over the world living a decent, normal, ordinary life.